High school stalker fantasized about my death. I moved a lot growing up. By the time freshman year of high school came around, I had moved 7 or so times and was about a year and a half into my most recent move. I had found a pretty close group of friends in middle school, and we all went to high school together. I met him through one of those close friends. They were in band together, and even though he was almost 4 years older than us, we welcomed him into our group. Sam was easily twice my size, tall and heavy-set, and originally kind of intimidating. Although I was never afraid of large men before him, lesson learned. I had a kind of bad home life, and I spent as much time as I could at school, sometimes hanging around the school campus until 6 or 7 at night with this friend group. 3 of us lived in the same direction, and we would walk the half-hour trip together until our paths split. One slightly colder evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the others had gone home already. I just thought he was being a gentleman. He mentioned something from a previous move when he lived in California. He didn't walk a friend home and something horrible happened. He left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We got a lot closer after that. We bonded over both living in California and exchanged numbers. He would message me late into the night about his depression and self-harm, and I just wanted to help. A few months later, he tried asking me out. It was this big romantic gesture. He learned a Disney song on the ukulele and sang to me in the cafeteria. But I was already dating someone, and when I turned him down, he got angry. A freaky, quiet, twitchy kind of angry. I felt so bad. I started seeing him everywhere. We were still friends, we still hang out in groups, but I would pass him on the street walking somewhere, and a few minutes later, I'd see that he changed directions and had started to follow me. He would walk me to classes by following me and passing period at a distance. I started to minimize the group time we spend together, and he would follow me more. I had friends meet me at each class and walk me to my next one because I felt unsafe. He knew where I lived. Then he started to talk. Not to me, but to mutual friends about that one girl in California who he tried to walk home. At first, she just shared my name, some crazy coincidence. Then she had the same brown curly hair and blue eyes. And every time he rambled about her, she became more and more like me. And then he said what happened. Over literal weeks, this fantasy evolved. They were walking home and they were jumped by some guy with a knife. It was a robbery gone wrong on her birthday, January 24th, my birthday, and she died horribly, and he couldn't react in time. She bled out in his arms. Sarah, who has brown curly hair, blue eyes, my name, my birthday, and sounds just like me, bled out in his arms. Each retelling added more and more detail, and this guy with his sick fantasy about my death would follow me around and knew where I lived. My boyfriend was abusive, mentally and physically, but I stayed as close to him as I could whenever I could, because if the worst happened, I knew for sure he could throw a punch. I never felt safe at school or in our little town walking home from school in the dark. One day at school, he had a breakdown, freaked out, and ran out of the school in a panic. I was sent after him, and I found him curled up on the floor. I got closer. I knew about his anxiety and depression, and my safety aside, I wanted to make sure he was okay. It was then that he told me this horrifying story that I had been hearing from mutual friends with added details. We had been walking home from a concert in California. We passed a dark alley, and a homeless man came out with a rusty knife and asked for anything valuable. I fumbled for my phone. I didn't have anything else on me, and he thought I was calling the cops. He stabbed me, once, twice, again and again, and Sam stood there horrified. He saw red and grabbed a broken glass bottle near my body and attacked the homeless man. He killed him with his own knife. He told me he killed someone. My stalker killed someone. It didn't matter how messed up he was anymore. I didn't care if it was a fantasy or real. I didn't care how it would affect his mental health anymore. I wanted to go to the police. I was scared for my life. My friends convinced me to go to the school counselor first. That morning, we went and told them everything. The stalking, the stories, how he admitted to murder, and that was the reason they moved from California. How I was afraid for my life and wanted to call the police. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She went to the principal, and the principal, not a mental health expert, called Sam in to talk about the accusations. The principal then informed me that he did not think that Sam had any kind of mental illness or that I was in any danger, and that was that. I lost faith in adults, gave up on going to the police. I stayed with my friend, walking me in between classes, hiding behind my abusive boyfriend, and looking behind me every step of my walk home that year. The counselors ended up gaslighting us to the point where this all feels like a fever dream now. And I would think it's made up if it weren't for my journal entries recording the events and my growing panic and the similar stories from my friend group. Story 2. A man tried to pick me up from school saying he was my dad's friend. When I was around 6, my parents divorced, and my dad was soon given full custody, as my mom is an alcoholic and had racked up a few Deweys and such. Anyway, me, my younger sister, and my dad moved to a new neighborhood, and we transferred to the nearby elementary school. The school was pretty close to my new house, maybe 7 or so blocks away. Close enough to walk, but my sister and I, also a girl, were too young to walk alone. Sometimes our dad would walk us to school in the morning and then walk back, and less commonly he'd walk to pick us up. Most of the time, he picked us up in his black Mazda. The way pickups worked at my school was pretty common. We went out with our class, stood by our teacher and classmates, and when a car pulled up, designated staff members would ask who the student was that they were picking up and then go find them with their class and escort them to their car. Seeing as my mom was in jail at this time, the only person who ever picked us up was my dad. One day, I was in 3rd grade and my sister was in 1st. We were outside waiting to be picked up. After being outside for only a few minutes, my little sister came over to me and said someone who wasn't dad was in a car to pick us up. He'd said both of our names and they'd found her first. She said he'd smiled at her and told her our dad had told him to pick us up that afternoon, but she said she wanted to find me first before she got in the car, since she didn't recognize him. Thank God she did that. Our dad had always told us not to talk to strangers, so I grabbed my teacher and told her what happened. She got a really alarmed look on her face and told us to stay where we were while she told another teacher or something. Our dad arrived to pick us up a few minutes later and we got home safely. We told him about it, and we all had a long talk about safety protocol. He asked my sister to describe the man in the car, and he called the police and gave them the best description he could, although my sister was very young and wasn't very focused on important details like that. A few weeks later it happened again, but this time he said my name. My dad had given the school the same info he'd given the police, but presumably he had multiple vehicles because my sister said he'd been in a red car and this one was black, similar to my dad's. I saw the black car and ran up to it, but luckily I caught a glimpse of the face before I opened the door and hopped in. He was middle-aged, really pale, with a really angular face. We made eye contact and his mouth was smiling, but his eyes looked really wrong to me, squint and almost angry. I turned back towards the carpool assistant who delivered me to the car to alert her, but by the time I did, the car was gone, and I couldn't give many details. My dad contacted the police again, but without a license plate, they weren't able to do much. The last time I saw him wasn't until months later, near the end of the school year. I was walking home with a big group of kids that lived in my neighborhood, and he drove by us and slowed the car down to try and talk to us. I recognized his face immediately and alerted the other kids to run. Luckily, we were only about 3 houses down from where one of my friends lived, and we all piled into her house, concerning her parents significantly as we explained the situation. I never saw him again after that. My dad started dating my now stepmom, and we moved to her neighborhood and switched schools shortly after. I still think about him occasionally, though. His face was actually in my dream a few nights ago, which reminded me to write about my experience. To this day, I'm in my 20s now. I don't know how he knew our names, how he knew anything about us, really. Very fucking scary to think about what would have happened to my tiny little sister if she'd gotten in the car with that man, and what might have happened to me if I had. To my childhood predator, please, let's not meet. Story 3. I almost got kidnapped at school. The title is a little bit dramatic, but I had no idea how to call it. So I was in grade 9 at a really shitty school. The system there sucked, and it was located in a dangerous area of the city I lived in. I actually just remembered the story because it was so usual for things like this to happen there, that for me, it was just normal, so I forgot it. But looking back at it now, I realized that it's not normal. So I was in PE class, and we were running laps around the school on the sidewalk to stretch. I was with my friend group of 5 girls, and we were walking behind, as always, because PE for us was talking about the school drama, all period. So we were walking and talking about the recent drama when a red truck slowed down beside us. It wasn't unusual. Every time we were walking outside of the school, a creepy man would slow down, so we didn't thought any of it and just kept walking and ignoring him. We saw his truck 2 or 3 times more. He was driving around the school and slowing down every time he passed by us. So we decided to tell our teacher that made us go back inside, in the gym. We started playing whatever game we were doing when the teacher came to me and told me I was asked to the main office because someone was here to pick me up. I was panicking because no one was supposed to pick me up during class that day, and I thought that maybe something bad happened to either my mom or my dad or someone in my family. So I got changed into my normal clothes, grabbed my backpack, and rushed to the office. When I got there, the lady told me that there was a man waiting for me outside of the main doors. I got a little confused because usually when my parents came to pick me up, they'd wait in the hall until I got there. I took a look through the glass door and saw an old man. I had never seen this man once in my life. I quickly walked back to the office and told the lady that I didn't knew him. And what she told me next froze me. She told me he said he was a friend of my parent, and that they asked him to pick me up because my mother got into a car accident. He told the lady my name and my last name, my age, my mom's name, and the grade I was in. I was shocked and immediately asked her if I could call my parents to confirm. So I called my dad, and he told me my mom was just fine, and he was at work. The lady just told me to go back to class, and I never saw that man again. I never knew what happened after I left, and how did he knew all of these infos about me. My parents talked to cops about this, and there was never anything. We never had answers. Since that happened, I moved into a much safer city, and I hope I'll never see this man again.